Season's greetings everyone. Gary here for the Amigos, and just going to go through how I do a replacement of the capacitors in this Amiga 600. So this would go for the Amiga 600, 1200s and the CD32. They have surface mount capacitors. So yep, I'll be recapping this little beastie here. So I'll show you how I do it. Just give you a rundown on the tools I use and the techniques. So first of all, obviously we want to remove the screws. So 1, 2, 3, 4 screws I've already removed there. So just remove those, and then lift up the front of the top half of the machine and reach in under there and pull there's a a LED cable there. Looks a little bit like a floppy drive power cable. Disconnect that, and that'll allow you to tip the whole top out of the way there, and just unclip the keyboard strip, flex strip there. So I'm just pulling up the little keeper there so it can remove the keyboard strip, and just going to remove the Compact Flash IDE drive adapter there. I'll get rid of this floppy disk drive in a second, but I'll see if I can get a close-up of the capacitors in this particular unit. They're not looking too bad, but I'm pretty much just going through most of my machines and replacing them anyway. But I'll zoom in and we'll get a better shot at the capacitors here. Okay, I'll do my best to keep this in focus. I'm just using the macro feature of my camera here. So you'll see there's a couple of 10 microfarad capacitors, the ones with the blue stripes on there. If you have a look at the little pads on the main board there, they're looking a little bit dull. And that's a dead giveaway that the capacitors are leaking. Get a little bit of electrolyte leaking down onto those pads. It makes them look quite dull. This board's not actually too bad. It's certainly not the worst I've seen. So I'll show you how I remove those and replace them with new capacitors. So next thing is to remove the floppy disk drive. So one screw down there through the board, main board. Actually that's a Torx screw. So I'm just using a Torx bit here. I'll go through in a second and just show you what tools I use. And my technique, it's not the way I've seen some people do it. I've seen some people use tweezers, soldering tweezers, to remove the capacitors by just putting the solder tweezers either side of the capacitor onto the pads, and you can remove the capacitor in one hit. That's nice if you've got soldering tweezers, which I don't have. I've just got a standard soldering iron. And so there's the floppy disk removed. And then we just need to take the board out and remove the shielding off the back. There's a shielding here, just one screw there. And make sure you pull this out here to let the game mouse and game port come free there. And there's our board. And then I'll just put these little tabs up here on the shielding. We'll get the shielding off. And that should we'll take these hex screws out there. Right, it's the screws off the back removed, and then we should be able to just get this out of here. Sometimes there's a screw in here. Just get rid of this shielding here. So this is a version 1.5 board. Okay, so we've got a bunch of capacitors here. One for the composite output there. A couple tucked down and behind this keyboard strip there, adapter. So I removed this to get into these two. There's another cap here and a couple over this side, one here and one here. Now, so as said before, I've seen people just get in with solder tweezers and just heat the pads up and remove the capacitor nice and easily. That seems to work really well. But the problem I've had with just using an iron by itself, a single soldering iron by itself, is that quite often these solder pads are quite corroded, and you get the soldering iron on there even with some good flux. I've got some good Weller solder flux here. You hit it with a good bit of flux. That's after cleaning it with isopropyl alcohol. And so clean it with isopropyl, hit it with flux, get the soldering iron in there, and just gently lift one end of the capacitor, just very, very gently. But what I find is that because the corrosion on those pads seems to stop the heat transferring through to the pad, and it's very easy to just lift the pad if you're not careful, because the solder hasn't actually melted even though you've got the hot iron on there. The heat doesn't seem to be transferring through, so I've not had any success with that. I've tried just sort of gently rocking back and forward, going either side with the soldering iron and just gently lifting the capacitor. That can work if you've got really good solder connections that aren't corroded. That actually works quite well. But I find the best method for me is just to get a really good pair of side cutters. So these are Fujiya MP4-110 side cutters. They're very sharp, very good, and I just literally cut the capacitor off, not right down at the base. I cut it, go side on, and the little groove down here. Not sure if that's focusing there. You'll see a little groove just above the top of the plastic there, and I just get in there, and you have to be very careful doing this. You don't want to be sort of rocking the pliers and putting any force on the pads at all, and you don't want to be sort of twisting or rocking either way or twisting or anything like that. You just want to go straight in and just a nice smooth cut. I do this very carefully. Looks brutal, but this I've recapped quite a few machines now, and I've not had any problems whatsoever. I've seen some people just getting pliers and twisting the cap off. I wouldn't recommend doing that at all. You could damage the pads doing that. So I just get in here and I just gently work my way like that. Now, yep. So these are very good side cutters. You wouldn't want to use blunt, cheap side cutters. I think these cost me like 30 New Zealand dollars or something around there. So, you know, 20 US dollars or something like that. They're, you know, not cheapest around, but definitely worth it. And then I just get in with a good, I've got a good pair of tweezers here, and I just get rid of this little remainder of the capacitor there, and there's a little rubber ring on the bottom. It's like almost like a gasket, I guess, to hold the electrolyte in. And often when I do this, although the capacitor looks fine and the pads look as though they're not all that corroded, I see electrolyte leaked underneath these. Now this here, these two little bits here, they are the two legs of the capacitor. They're actually quite fat at the top there. I'll just get in and trim those gently, and that way this plastic here will just pop off like so. And these are the two legs still attached to the pads there. And so pretty much all I do there, I'll just get a bit of isopropyl alcohol and a cotton bud. Oh, it's what we call a cotton bud, Q-tip I think they're called in the States. So we get ourselves a Q-tip. And I just, a bit of a clean there. That just really sort of gets rid of any residual electrolytes that might have leaked onto the board, and just makes it a little bit easier to get the soldering iron in there, or to get the heat transferring through when soldering. So I'm putting my soldering iron temperature on about 290. You don't really want to go much higher than 290 apparently, so I've read. Okay, and I'm using a Heiko FX 888D soldering iron with a chisel type tip. Okay, and then I'll just go in with a bit of flux. Just a little bit of flux on the connectors there. So I just get in and just heat that up. There's one of the, get it there, one of the little legs there attached to my tweezers still. So that's one done. There's another one off there now. Okay, I'll just quickly do the other one there. That one's leaking quite badly, I think. Looks quite brutal, but if you're careful, I don't think there's any problem doing this. It's just the best method I could find that doesn't damage the board. It's a bit harder to do this with a camera. Never mind. So even that one took a little bit more heat, or a bit more time than the others, mainly because it was a little bit corroded. Looks good. And then I'll just go over again with a bit of isopropyl alcohol. Give that a bit of a clean up. This one's looking pretty good. And then let's get a little bit of solder wick here. Just hit it with a little bit more flux. I was very scared of doing this when I first did it, because I didn't really want to go damaging any of these irreplaceable boards. But so I practiced on old server boards, old RAID controller boards and things like that that were just being thrown out. So I'd pull the capacitors off them, and well, I'd desolder them, and wouldn't cut them off like this, but and then resolder them on just for practice, really. That was quite good. Quite a good exercise there. So to replace these two here, I've got a little bit of solder paste here, and I'm just going to apply a little bit of solder paste. Like that. Capacitor is the strip along the back of the capacitor there, that's negative, and you'll see on the board positive this side, so negative's up here, so we just position that appropriately. So that's got the one side of the capacitor on temporarily there, well, not temporarily held, but it's held in place. I'll just go this other side here. And then normally I'll just get a little bit more flux on there. Just get a little bit of solder onto the iron here. So just go in here. I'll do this one right-handed here. Just go for that one again. And that's it. There's one of the two capacitors done. So I'll just quickly do the other one there. Bit of solder on the iron. That's it. Two capacitors replaced there. So tools I use are flux, good pair of tweezers, a standard pair of bent tweezers there, obviously soldering iron, isopropyl alcohol, flux paste, good side cutters, a couple of screwdrivers, Phillips screwdriver, Torx, and a 5mm spanner just for those back back screws there, and what I will use for getting this off is a solder sucker. I've got it's just a cheap solder sucker, but seems to do quite a good job. So I'll be running down these pins here and desoldering those pins, taking this connector off so to give me access to these two here. So I'll come back when that's done and just show you in behind there. The other thing I make sure I do is give the capacitor area a bit of a clean with isopropyl alcohol, just to remove any of that flux residue. That's pretty good there. Now I removed one of the small 10 microfarad capacitors from this area here, and you may be able to see there it looks a little bit corroded on the legs there, and that's where you run into trouble if you're just using a soldering iron, trying to get the heat transferred through the entire length of the pad and onto the leg there to release that leg from the pad. And that's why I've been cutting these off, so I can get access to the full length of the leg and the pad with the soldering iron. So that's a perfect example of one that looked okay from the outside, but once you get in there you can have a good look and see that they're actually corroded. So yeah, so I'm going to remove this connector here now. I reflow the connection just to make it a bit easier on the solder sucker, so that the solder sucker has a better chance of removing as much solder as possible there. I might just need to bump the iron temperature up a little bit there. So I'm going up to about 330 degrees Celsius here, just gives it a bit more go there. So for the capacitors, yeah, about 290. So just so you don't damage the pads. That end one there takes a bit more heat because it's on the ground plane there. I've done those two. So that's ready to get with the solder sucker now. I'll try my best to get that on camera. Okay. Sorry about the noise there. The solder sucker is quite noisy. Right. Righto. And next thing to do is to I'll go along with a little flat-headed screwdriver here, and I'm just going to check to see if each pin's free or not, and just free it from the wall if I can with the screwdriver, and maybe just get the soldering iron onto it again. So I find if I just give them a bit of a free up with the soldering iron, and a bit of a wiggle there, it frees them up. Give it a bit of a wiggle back and forward from the other side there, can show you what pins aren't free. I think most of them are free. Yeah, they are. So that's just falling out there now. Okay, so there's the all connected, desoldered. And if we have a look on the other side, gives me access to these capacitors here. They're tucked up closely to these audio outputs. I have on other ones I've actually desoldered the audio outputs too, so I can get to both sides of the capacitor. But what I've been doing is cutting the capacitors off, cleaning up the pads there, and then I can actually get in. I've got a relatively narrow solder tip here that I can get in just in behind here with it without sort of burning anything else there. So that seems to work quite well. So the other thing is you've got to be careful taking these big through-hole capacitors off, because the legs are often through the ground plane, which takes quite a bit of heat to desolder. And the legs are a little bit bent as well on them, so they don't come out through the holes cleanly, and there could be danger of actually removing the via in the through hole, which you definitely don't want to do there. So I just get a pair of pliers and just give them a little bit of a straighten up. So anything you can do really here to sort of help those pins go through the hole smoothly, the better really. So just gently either side. Probably should reflow that. The other one's not behaving itself. Just reflow this here. So I'm just holding the capacitor on the back, on the top side of the board, and just gently rocking it out. You don't want to do too much at once, you just want to gently do one side to the other, just stepping along. There may be better ways of doing this, I don't know, but this works for me. And so just gentle as it goes. And now I've got myself a little ESR meter here that I can read capacitors with, or measure capacitors, and get an idea of what sort of state they're in. I like to do this with the through-hole ones at least anyway. Obviously the other ones I can't because I've destroyed them, but this is a 470 microfarad, so let's just see what we get here. This is one of the ones that just come out of the board, and we've got 437, so it's down a little bit in capacitance, and 0.0 0.14 ohms ESR. So that's ESR is equivalent series resistance. There's plenty of videos that explain it on the internet, on YouTube. Very good videos explaining that. So, but yeah, there's a bit of resistance there. But if, maybe compare that to a new one. So we've got 437. Should be 470. This is a brand new one, and we get close to 470 at 0.34 ohms ESR. So I think the original one's a little bit down in resistance there. Here's another one of the originals. 0.13 ohms, 433. So both of those caps are down. That's the 470s, and there's a couple of 1000s here. Let's see what we get here. $940.14 ohms. Not too bad. Just measure this last one. I don't have any new 1000s, 1000 microfarad capacitors. 951.14. Probably not too bad, although I did notice that where one of the 1000 microfarad capacitors came from, you notice just here a bit, looks like the capacitor's been leaking a bit there. It's sort of taken the solder mask off the top of the board there, so I'll just fix that up with a little bit of nail polish, and you can see I've done the capacitors there, so they're all the surface mount caps, they're all done there. There's the two by the keyboard connector, and these ones over this side here. So all I have to do now is just put the 3-hole capacitors in, the keyboard connector, and crank it up, see how it goes. And the capacitors I'm using, I'll try and get 5000 hour capacitors, so you know, they should last for, well, plenty of games of Stunt Car Racer anyway. That they should last. So yep, I'll put it back together and we'll do some testing. Alright, let's see if this has been a successful job. Screen's on. Oh, the power light, that's promising. Black screen. So one thing I've learned is you do have to be patient when testing these machines. Sometimes they can lead you to believe that they're actually faulty when they're not. But that is looking good there. Just check the keyboard there. Yeah, no problems there. Okay. Next thing, hook up sound and get something, playing some sound here. Just loading God's here, let's see if we can get some sound. Sounding pretty good. Okay. Well, not fully tested, but sound, floppy disk, keyboard, everything seems to be in order. So yeah, thanks for watching. Catch you next time.